territorial disputes has once again captured international attention as violence flares in the South Caucasus region. Roughly 150,000 Armenians fled the disputed enclave of Nagorno-Karabakh in late September after Azerbaijan attacked. Azerbaijan now demands that Armenia hand over 8 more villages in the region. Armenia has so far refused. Eric Mock with Slavic Gospel Association explains, the area of Nagorno-Karabakh is really a sacred area. In fact, the people that live there go back many, many, many generations. It has been at a flashpoint for especially the last year because there has been this blockade that has meant no food and no resources coming to the region of about 150,000 people. The conflict, which has its origins in the early 20th century and was reignited in the late 1980s, centers on the disputed region of Nagorno-Karabakh. The two nations, Armenia and Azerbaijan, have engaged in multiple military clashes and full-scale wars, resulting in significant loss of life and instability in the region. Mock with SGA has had a relationship with Armenian churches since the 1990s. We have been supporting their missionary pastors. We have been helping them with their Orphans Reborn program and Children's Christmas program. Of course, Emmanuel's Child is coming up and training now as well. So all aspects of SGA ministry have actually been engaged in the country of Armenia since the fall of the Soviet Union. SGA has supported 3 Armenian churches in Nagorno-Karabakh, specifically with food aid and spiritual encouragement. Now, those churches fled. They lost everything, their buildings, everything, their livelihood, but they regathered outside of Yerevan, Armenia. And Mock says he was able to spend time with them. The 3 churches that fled have already reformed and have grown by 40% from other refugees coming and trying to ask for those messages of hope. So what God has done, much like we saw in the crisis in Ukraine, is He has provided a circumstance by which these churches are now flourishing, even though they've lost everything. Churches already established in Yerevan are also housing refugees from Nagorno-Karabakh. Story after story, we hear refugees that have come and have heard the gospel, says Mock. Several of them would have been antagonistic to the Christian appeal, the gospel. The thought of even walking through a church, their context was that Armenian Apostolic Church, so they had been taught the Protestant Church was against the faith, against the good of the country, against all the people. But they found that those were the churches that were actually trying to take care of them. Those are the churches from which they heard the message of grace, and people are coming to faith. So remember to pray for the Armenians to know that they are not forgotten by the church. And ask the Lord to add fuel to the church in Armenia and for the gospel to change hearts across the region. That's a good story. Thank God that He's working in their lives and, and
there
making a way for them.
Yeah, there's so many people that need help. Which is,
It's just astounding. All the persecution that's ramping up around the world.
Yeah, it is. Well, we're over here in Minsk, and Minsk, M-I-N-S-K, is the capital of Belarus. It's really kind of funny because, now this comes to us by forum18.org, and they cover a lot of the stuff that you may not see anywhere else. Because they're dealing in Russia, some of the former Russian republics, in some areas that you probably wouldn't even think about. And Form 18 covers all manner of, civil rights and equal rights. Not just Christians, but they have a full slate that they watch out for. And earlier this year, the Minsk City Court ordered the liquidation of New Life Full Gospel Church. Now, see, this is a full gospel church. There's a difference between a full gospel and another kind. Now, in America, a full gospel church is like a Pentecostal church. It goes back to Amy Semple McPherson. It goes back to the Azusa Street revivals, the Assemblies of God. They are their roots were in the full gospel church and the Pentecostal movement. Now these, it doesn't matter what it is when you get over in Russia and some of these other countries. They definitely really monitor the churches. Now see, the way the Biden administration and some of them have been acting towards Christians and patriots and stuff gives us the idea that there are those in our government that want to do the same thing. And I'm convinced that's exactly what they will do. And we've already seen part of this already. Now, the Minsk Executive Committee, there was particular one person, I'm not going to read her name, she had called for liquidation of the New Life Full Gospel Church. Now this is where they come into the extremists. See, if you're preaching a gospel where you need to have Jesus Christ in your heart and life and you need to repent absolutely, then the world is going to get mad at you. It will, every time. And in America, it is like that. In the America I was raised in and Tower was raised in, everybody went to a church on Sunday. Sundays were closed. And, you went to church and you knew who Yeshua was. So she called for this particular church to be closed because the online materials they found extremists. Now, see, that's the new word.
Yeah, that's horrible. I hope they lose it. I hope that she loses the case and the church can keep going.
Well, this word extremist is exactly what the Biden administration uses.
Yeah.
So, it's easy. What is an extremist? Well, I would call Hamas an extremist because they burn little babies in ovens until they're black. And they do a lot of other things.
And they brag about it.
Yeah, and they brag about it. So, make no mistake, there's extremists out there. But if you're a Christian, you believe in redemption and salvation, which is you have a right to, and before God, but the Lord said, if they hated me, they will hate you. And they definitely hated the Lord. All you have to do is get into John and read that a healthy number of portions, and you begin to understand. She claimed that the church had conducted activity not set out in its statute. And so the church, therefore, went against it. They didn't want the liquidation. And a church member recently told Forum 18 that they're waiting, for an answer. Well, sometimes answers don't come for a long time, and sometimes by the time the answer comes, they've already shut shut the door of the church and evacuated it, and it's vacant, and they get rid of it before even something comes down. And now these materials, well, you can imagine what it is. It's about redemption, about change. you know. It's about the true and the living God. That's why, there's going to be wickedness, and there's going to be a tribulation. Because, there are those who are wicked. And when Christ comes again, and it states that clearly, he will destroy those who have destroyed the earth. And in the process of destroying the earth, they killed multitudes. So, even though the materials from the New Life Church don't violate any rights of others, they still want to get rid of them. And New Life continues to meet in what they call borrowed churches, because the regime kicked them out of their own building. And see, remember,
what a crock.
They kicked them out of the building, and they haven't even gotten a verdict yet.
Yeah, they haven't even been to court. That's wrong.
And of course, the one that did it refused to explain why she had did that. And so, recently, it was a few years back, they demanded a large tax that New Life Church has to pay. And they renewed it in July of 2023, and they put it into court. And the court ruled in favor of the church in November of this year, but they're still in a mess. They still don't have, I don't understand how they can have favor in a judgment and they don't even have their church. How does that work?
Good question.
This is nuts, but this is the way it is. Now, we got a little bit different deal coming up here. And we're going through a few things from International Christian Concern Persecution.org. And this is their persecuted coverage of 2023. And we're going through nations that are the top threat to Christians. And of course here we've got, it shouldn't be any surprise, it's Iran. So, Iran, led by Grand Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, he's the one that operates the Islamic Republic with a strict adherence to Islam. Now, Tower, earlier when I was telling you about that woman that I saw online that was buried up to her neck.
Yes.
She was from Iran, I believe. And they were giving her a tablespoon of water, and then they were going to stone her to death. And the only thing she had was her head sticking above the ground. This is brutal.
It is.
So, Iranian prisons are notorious for harsh conditions and torture. Many Christians suffering incarceration for their faith. That's a fact. Iran's anti-Christian agenda extends beyond its borders. That's a fact. As the Islamic Revolutionary Corps influences neighboring countries. That's a fact. District restrictions on church activities, worship, Christian gatherings, coupled with growing anti-Christian sentiment, pose significant challenges to religious freedom. And the government cracked down on public protests in 2022 to 23. And so Christians and religious minorities suffer severe persecution under Sharia law and this theocratic rule.